Serenbe is a place where people live, work, learn, and play in celebration of life's beauty. And we're here to share the stories that connect residents and guests to each other and to nature. This is Serenbe Stories. Welcome back to Serenbe Stories. We have gone through 11 episodes, or actually 10 episodes, and this is our 11th one. And we've heard all about your stories, Steve. And today we wanted to basically bring in the three girls who really were part of the reason why you moved down to this area in the first place. And all of your stories have been incredible, but we wanted to check and see, maybe fact check you a little bit and see if, they were all accurate and how they came back and what were their impressions of the farm. So I wanted to welcome all three of your daughters. We have Garnie, Quinn, and Kara here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
I'm glad you guys are here. And I'm hoping, Steve, you'll do just a quick introduction for your daughters.
Absolutely. Well, sitting across from us with us at the table, we have Garnie, our eldest daughter, who, when we first bought the farm, was 7 years old. And Garnie now lives here with her husband, Matt, and son, Stevie. And Garnie is our director of operations and basically runs everything. And as a dear friend just reminded me this morning, reminds him a lot of me at that age, but she's just a lot more charming. And as I always say, she thinks a lot faster. Kara is our second daughter. And Kara lives here with her husband, Micah, and her two children, Amos and Kai. And Kara has always been, as a typical middle child, I guess, the nurturer. And her big issue was always to be a mother. So she was not on the career path like her older sister. And so now she is here, being the mother, owns the Serenbe camp, which has like 60, 70 kids every week during the summer, and has just opened the daycare called Little Acorns. So it's great to have Kara here filling her passion. And Quinn, our youngest daughter, lives here with her husband, Lucas, who's just opened the wine store. And Quinn was the one person who always thought the farm was dirty. And I forget at what age informed us at dinner that when she was 18, she'd be packing her bags and out of here. And so I'm delighted that due to her two older sisters, gradually through an entire journey, they have enticed her back, and she's now our brand manager and really protects all the images. So between the three girls, as a father, I just couldn't imagine a day that they would all live here in the community we were building, and that my grandchildren would be raised a few feet from where I lived or from the office. But between the three of them, they really hold the entire image of what we as a family have created in what the world now knows as Serenbe.
That's great, Steve. So one of the things everybody's been listening for these past weeks talked about sort of how we've gotten here after 15 years, but I don't think we've really talked about what was it like 15 years ago, or even before that, 30 years ago when you guys were little girls on the farm. So one of the first things I want to ask to sort of kick it off was the very first time you guys drove down here that day, if you remember it. What was your first impression of the farm? Because it's very, very clear in Steve's head, but do you guys remember the first time you guys came to the farm that day?
I don't think I don't think I necessarily remember the exact first day, but I think probably what's more formidable and as a memory is probably like the first years, right? So you think because the first time we came, I was 7, Kara was 5, and Quinn was 3. So Quinn probably definitely had no memories even from the early years. But I think we remember from the beginning of those first 6, 12 months, the ability just that when we came down, we just ran, right? So we could be outside. We had our pet goats. So a friend within a couple of months of buying the farm gave us 3 goats. And so we each had our own goat that we would come down and feed and make sure they had water. And so it was just that total sense of freedom, right? Of being down here and not having the restrictions of having to ask if you could go outside and what you could do.
Do you remember weekends, Kara, at all?
Yes, I would say the same thing. I don't think I specifically remember that exact first visit other than now hearing it back. It sort of seems like a memory. I don't know if it's an actual specific memory, but the experiences, I remember the goats. My goat's name was Whitey. And I remember coming down and walking through the trails and my dad cutting new paths with a chainsaw. So yeah, just a collection of memories that sort of compile the different experiences that we had, sleepovers in the little cabin, and adventures kind of as we would escape the city.
Quinn, do you have any favorite memories? It doesn't even have to be the beginning, but just I'm so curious.
Some memories. Obviously, I thought the farm was dirty. So, I was maybe a little bit more preferable to the city life at that young age. But yeah, I think it's, kind of building on what Garnie and Kara both sort of said of just like kind of that freedom of like being outside in nature, even if it was dirty. Was great. Just having the animals and the trees and everything. And, I do remember, having friends that would then even come and visit. Maybe that was like a little later on, more so, not the earlier days, but just how much everyone loved to come visit the farm. Because it was just a different experience than anyone else kind of had.
Right. What were your weekends, when you came down here, we have access to sort of everything, restaurants and yoga and cold pressed juice, all that the city would want to offer. But what was it like? There really wasn't, quote unquote, the city offerings. Was there anything that you missed or that appeared that was exciting at any particular time?
I mean, I think as kids, there was nothing we missed, right? Because as a kid, your what you miss more than anything is the ability to run outside and drive golf carts and ride horses. So anything that we would have missed as kids, we were actually opting into. So if anything, I think probably when we ended up in Atlanta, we missed the things from the farm. And I think that's still true of when you see kids who live in Serenbe or who are just here on the weekends. You, as a child, you miss the things that Serenbe offers. So I think, but it was literally just us. When we wanted to play a game of kickball or baseball, there were 3 of us and really only 2 of us because Quinn wouldn't necessarily participate.
Karen, you want to add something?
So I was going to say the only thing that I missed was friends. Yes, we had a wonderful relationship as sisters, but as we have said, Quinn sort of preferred to be inside. So, and Garnie liked to be in charge. So when I wanted to play kickball, for example, I had to be everything except for the pitcher. And Garnie told me that she would play with me if she could tell me what to do and when to do it. So while that was really fun and we had a blast most of the time, that was kind of the one thing was a lot of other kids our age because we didn't really have any neighbors. Obviously, we went to school, so we were not, robbed of that experience. But for me, that's why I think the community of Serenbe is so great now. When people ask me, do you feel like people have taken over your woods? I always say no, because I loved everything about my childhood, but always felt like I was missing friends to run in the woods with. So now it's pretty awesome to see kids that get to have the same experience we had, but with their best friends who live down the street.
So one of the things is the house that you guys lived in was a 1905 farmhouse that you moved into and eventually kind of turned into a B&B. But tell me a little bit, because there's a story of how you got to choose rooms, and I always sort of find it fascinating walking through the farmhouse today. What were your bedrooms in what is the farmhouse and the inn today?
Yeah, and I think so. Our first bedrooms in the first 1905 house that we moved to, I had 2 bedrooms in the house. My first one is actually now, when you go to the farmhouse, it's the bathroom off of the farmhouse hose stand. And I think when we first moved into the house, it was probably just Kara and I that flipped a coin 4 rooms because Quinn naturally got the biggest room because she was the only one that still had toys. And so Quinn's room served as both her bedroom and like a toy room. And Kara and I had the tiny rooms that basically just like allowed for a twin size bed and some clothes, which like in hindsight is all you ever really need. Right. But I think that from that, and like Kara, I don't know what your memory is or Quinn, but like from that, when we did the bedroom edition, each of our rooms was literally like measured to be dimensionally the exact same size to the inch. And we all had a window seat and we all had a bathroom and a closet that was exactly the same size.
And what are those rooms now?
So I grew up in room 4.
I grew up in room 2. And mine's room 3.
And Steve, why did you want it just exact down to the right dimension? Was that just all about fairness or?
It was about fairness. We were very conscious that, you wanted to make experiences as equal as possible. And so they were exact rooms. The only thing that was different was the view out the window. And so that was the only thing they had to decide about. And I don't think we flipped. I forget how you all chose which room you would have. And then they each got to design the interiors. So some now have bookcases, some just had furniture. So they got to decide then what happened inside.
I do actually remember how we got to choose. It was determined that the oldest, and as I got passed down, got to choose.
Oh.
Yeah, so Garnie got to pick first. And she chose the room that was by itself on the one side because she didn't want to be next to both of us. She wanted her own side of the house. And then Kara got to pick next. I forget why you chose yours. And then I got the third one. But honestly, I think that I had the best view. So.
It's true.
And you did.
I was just going to say what Garnie described about the very original rooms that we lived in. Like if somebody were to walk in there today, it's hard to imagine because it's been renovated and changed. But during that renovation process, the one room that still has not like had a single change in it is what serves as the private dining room for the farmhouse. And Quinn and I actually shared that room. We had bunk beds in there for like 9 months.
Fun.
While the house was under construction. So I think it's kind of neat just because that's the only room that like still looks exactly as it did. It has a dining room table, but we had 2 bunk beds and like our stuff in there.
It was great. Another story that I've heard that I'd love to have you guys share is once the inn kind of got up and running, there wasn't really any place to get dinner here. And so one summer, I believe it's a summer, correct? One of you decided. Two of you.
So it was, I was the summer that I was 15 and Kara was 14. So that would have been the summer of 1999.
Yes.
It was the summer of 99. The bed and breakfast was getting like slightly busier. There were more than like 2 people there on the weekends. And it's also hard to like imagine now with the 5 restaurants that we have in the neighborhood, but your options were basically to like, we would give people directions of you can go to Frank's, this restaurant like attached to, or you can drive to Peachtree City. But by the time you get to Peachtree City, you're like almost back in Atlanta, right, for dinner. And so I was like, Kara, let's run a restaurant for the summer and we'll learn how to cook 3 things and we can make the same 3 things every single of the 3 nights. So depending on when people were here, we would run it either Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Quinn wasn't involved only because she was like, you guys are crazy. And I decided that if we were going to charge people and keep the money, that we needed to like fully independently do it with no help or assistance from our parents. So my mom taught us how to cook the 3 meals. And when so we learned how to cook them and we literally worked 14-hour days. So we prepped the food, we cooked the food, we served the food, and we did the dishes.
Wow.
And we would never tell people when they were checking in, we would say like, we have a dinner option like this evening. Would you like to like reserve? And we would never tell them that we were cooking it. We just let people like think that like my mom was cooking dinner. And it was after we served them and after they ate And it was 3 courses. So it started like a salad and then you had dinner and then a dessert.
Nice.
And it was after they finished that we would then tell them like that we had cooked the dinner, and everybody left us like insane tips. Yeah. 100 and 200% tips because this 14 and 15-year-old were cooking dinner.
So, yeah, I would say it was probably Garnie's first successful operation. It lasted for one and only summer because the next summer Garnie turned 16 and she had a car, and I thought she was crazy and agreed to, or said I would never do it again, because we did for an entire summer. So like 9 weeks, work 3 days a week for 14 to 15-hour days, really 4 days because we had like a prep day. Halfway through the summer, Garnie did agree to let me hire Quinn on a like part-time basis because I thought it was getting really intense, like the 16th hour of the night when I was washing dishes after we'd been working all day. Garnie's like, work harder.
What did Quinn come in and do?
Quinn agreed to help us like come 8 o'clock with like the cleanup and dishes.
Nice.
For
they pay you a fair wage,
for
Quinn.
for 1 or 2 weeks. But it was a very successful operation. Garnie probably used it to buy her first house. I don't know what happened to my portion of the... I used to spin it in college or something like that.
Quinn, do you remember anything about that time or happy memories?
Yes, great times. Not nearly as much as definitely these two, but obviously thought they were pretty crazy for spending that amount of time. But they had great work ethic, and it's happy to pitch in there at the end.
That's great. Another great story that I have heard a lot of, and we have a road named after it now, is Prom Field. Mm-hmm. Who wants to kick that one off and tell us a little bit about why we have Prom Field and what that signifies?
Garnie started the tradition, so
I'll kick it off because I started it. So it was my senior year of high school. And Woodward, where we went to middle school and high school, had decided that the PTA for prom had decided that they were going to end post-prom at like 2 a.m. and that the only way that you could go home is if your parent came and checked you out. So all of our classmates basically boycotted and said, that's crazy, because when you're a senior in high school, you feel like you're, the oldest, coolest person ever. And so then post-prom, the official post-prom was canceled. And so a couple of my friends said like, well, since like there's no post-prom, could we all just like come down to the farm afterwards and like maybe pitch some tents? Mm-hmm. And I was like, that could be a good idea. Like, I'll ask my parents. And so I like probably pitched it that lightly. Like, what if we just have like
few people?
What if we just have like a couple of people and we all come like down after prom? And I think luckily we knew someone who had done this like a couple years before for their kids. And so called and said like, okay, what makes sense and what does this logistically look like? But so it turned into, a few people turned into 350 people.
Wow.
With like full on 4-page legal permission slips from each parents. And you had to be in by like midnight. And then you were taken via car down in a hayride, like down to the site. And at the site, people had come a week, like the full week before, to set up tents and like put everything. It was like Tent City. And everybody stayed until 7 a.m. So you weren't allowed to leave until 7 a.m.
Right.
And so that became, so I was like, oh, we'll do it this one time, right? And like everybody gets to do it for their senior year, like this one nice, like special thing that happens this one time. And then Kara, which she can tell you, figured out how to make it happen like 6 times during her junior and senior, for birthday parties.
Oh, do
and
tell.
all
I didn't know this side of the story. Do tell.
So, yes, I was definitely the social one in high school. And Garnie, and I guess my parents really, were gracious enough to let me make a cameo appearance at Garnie's senior post-prom party because I liked a lot of her friends. And I was only there for a little bit. Was like, wow, this is really fun. We should do this more often. Why not? The land is here. Like, why not? So I did, probably with the help of Garnie, sell my parents on letting me have a homecoming party my junior year. And I think a prom party that year as well. And then my birthday party that summer. And then
Garnie's face right now.
another homecoming party senior year, and our prom party, and a going away party. So yeah, people in my class were really fortunate and enjoyed it. So I think Quinn sort of continued the tradition, and I'll let her add to that. But we were each 2 years apart in school.
Okay.
And so people in the classes in between us used to joke like, oh man, we don't have a Nygren in our class. Like, what are we going to do? So the parties definitely, even I think after Quinn graduated, were still talked about for a long time.
Do you have any added stories there, Quinn?
Well, there are lots of stories from those days, but not too many we choose to share anymore.
Not podcast appropriate.
Exactly. But yeah, no, I think just what they said, they did just kind of exponentially grow with each year and each one of us. So yeah, needless to say, by the time it got down to me, they were quite legendary parties. I think my parents were very glad when I graduated.
Steve is nodding.
Yeah, the other thing, all those campfires during prom parties, I was the the fire master through the night. And I was so happy when Quinn graduated.
Yes.
I didn't realize it was going to become such a tradition. And not only would there maybe be 2 more, but there would be several for various celebrations. And when Quinn graduated, I was so happy that was the last time that I was going to be up all night dealing with a campfire. And then we just referred to that general meadow area as prom field. And when we started planning the Phase 3 motto, the road that was going to connect that through the pasture and back over to the inn runs right by that meadow that we've always referred to as prom field. And so when we were doing with the working drawings in that road, I just started referring to it as Prom Field Road. And finally, when we had to name the roads, I said, well, why shouldn't it be Prom Field Road? And it's really fun today when I see various people that were in one of their classes and they end up down in Motto and see the signs. They, wow, Prom Field. And today, that is where Sleepy Hollow is held. And we plan to make that an actual park and a place possibly for outside art performances in the future.
The sort of classic story, and this is more Garnie, that Steve tells, and I'm sure kind of all of us do, is the meadow story, the wildflower meadow story. Yes. And so I always hear Steve tell it, and I've definitely been on tours with you, Garnie, but like, is that something, again, I know that when we tell stories, it sort of memorializes them, but tell me your sort of nugget of that day, if you can.
That moment in 1999. Mm-hmm. And so, well, I think so. It's hard to, again, it's like hard to be at Serenbe today and think back to like, we just lived on the farm, right? And at that point it was 300 acres, but so I ran cross country accidentally, really, in high school, and it was great. I say accidentally because a friend was like, you should try out. And that trying out for cross country came from our avid runs, right? And so my dad was a runner growing up. And so at one point, probably in like 7th grade, I also started running with him. And so it was a morning, I think late morning in 1999 when we were on one of our runs. And if you're out in the woods in Serenbe today, and familiar with what we call the Little Waterfall, we were on that trail, headed back to what's now the house, and the trail is still there today. And absolutely remember coming up upon a man who was clear cutting the field adjacent to us, and our run stopped, and my dad left and like approached the man on the bulldozer and said, "What's going on? And why are you here?" And just remember kind of that moment of like, you didn't know what was coming or that something was changing. But that like this land that we had lived amongst, that there was never something as destructive as a bulldozer taking out like 20 acres of trees. And then upon not having an answer, going back to the house. And so it wasn't what is probably the most pivotal moment of like Serenbe, right? And that moment in time was kind of like in that day was a calm moment, but a calm in that like what's going on and we're not really sure. And when we got back to the house, I didn't necessarily have a sense of like the franticness of like my dad going and getting on the phone and figuring out like what in the world is happening. But it was, you went from being out here for 8 years where there's literally nothing happening to all of a sudden one day you're on a run that you're on all of the time and a bulldozer's in the field taking down 20 acres of trees.
Right. I think the most exciting thing was when Domino's opened. I think somebody told me at one point.
In 2000.
That's a big deal.
But it's funny, right?
Pizza delivery, it's a necessity.
And in all of the history points and like in the moments, and this might be like this is like off of the question, but it's funny to think back and like the pieces of history that we talk about now. And when you think like this was happening from 1999 to kind of like 2001, when of thinking about like, okay, what is this land and what is the Chattahoochee Hill Country? And we think now about like internet and GIS and all of this like crazy stuff that then didn't exist. And so after the realization of like, well, what's happening and who lives around here and who are all of the neighbors, I went with my dad to all of the courthouses because we didn't have access to online property records. Like you actually had to physically go to courthouses and pull. And, God, I wish we'd save these. I hand colored, like he would give me like the names of owners and I would hand color maps for legends to figure out and identify like through mapping, like which owner was where. So we had like blue dots and pink dots and blue hash marks. And so I spent the summer of like 2001 marking up, or 2000 probably really, hand marking up maps from the courthouses to identify property owners.
Wow. And did you, Kara was oblivious? You were oblivious?
I said I had a boyfriend.
Oh, you had a boyfriend? You were busy doing something else. Sorry.
Priorities.
Was that the summer before you headed off to college?
Yes, that was the summer before I went to college.
So, Garnie, you headed off to Cornell.
Yes.
And you knew at that point, like, you wanted to go into hospitality.
Yes. So I knew I wanted to go into hospitality and it was like, Dad's talking about building houses in the woods. Like when I was hand coloring the maps and identifying landowners, it was more about like getting to know, it was organizing neighbors. There was no plan then. It was just like, so when I went to college, it was like, Dad's kind of talking about like maybe one day building houses in the woods. We don't really know what that means because like you couldn't access the woods on anything other than foot and golf cart.
Right.
Like the road that comes from the inn now across the dam you could not drive on that.
Right.
It was like, what we're going to like, people are going to walk to houses in the woods? Like, how is anyone, like, where back in the woods is anyone going to live?
Cabins?
Yeah, exactly.
Tiny houses?
And I remember the kind of like moment where I was like, oh, maybe like this is going to be something. So I went, I worked at the Statler Hotel on Cornell's campus. And I was at the front desk in 2004 and the USA Today like hit the front desk and on the cover of the living section was a picture of my dad walking out of the dirt road, right? And it was a lifestyle picture.
Crazy.
And I get choked up thinking about it, a lifestyle picture of like what's going to be Serenbe. And I was like, guys, that's my farm, right? They're going to build houses in the woods. So
yeah. Do you guys remember? I mean, did you know about that? You would have been at Boulder by then.
No, I was by then I was in Boulder when that magazine came out. Yes. Okay. So I graduated in 2004, in May of 2004. So from high school.
Okay.
The summer that I graduated, they broke ground on the road that leaves the Wildflower Meadow. And really before that moment, I would say I was pretty oblivious to what was happening. I, was very into my social life and spending time on the weekends with friends and my boyfriend and going to the beach and the lake. I knew Garnie was kind of doing stuff, but until this very moment, actually, I've never heard that story about her coloring maps. So when I left for school to go to college, to go to University of Colorado in Boulder, I was like at this point knew and like had seen the drawings and stuff, but was sort of just like, oh, this is sure. Yeah. My dad's talking about a bake shop and some houses and, I'm going to go to Boulder for 4 years and come back to Atlanta. I always knew I wanted to come back, but I was like, yeah, I'm going to live in Atlanta, with my family and we'll come down here on the weekends. This sounds great. Sure. Like whatever you want to do. I do remember hearing from Garnie about that moment when she was at Cornell. I always thought that she was going to go travel the world and open a bunch of hotels, or be president of the United States.
Still time.
Exactly. But I was I remember talking to her when she saw that story and kind of had that moment and saying that she was maybe going to come back. And I was just like, okay, again, I was sort of just like in my life and school, I was on a track to, try and get married young and have kids and all of that stuff, and just wanted to be back in Atlanta and be near my parents, but had no intention of ever.
Right. This will be vacation.
Exactly.
Down here.
This would be like our little getaways on the weekends, but never, thought about really being a part of it. But I think that was the great gift, and that's kind of a different topic, but that my parents gave us is that, when we were young, Garnie wanted to be like president, literally, of the world or, country. And I always said, like, I want to be a mom. And my parents said, like, those are both equal, So I never felt like I had to come back and be a part of it. There was no pressure to do that.
Right. I want to ask Quinn, because you were still here.
Yes.
So both Garnie and Kara are off of college, but you're still here. The road's being broken, the Daisy is open, maybe? Tell me a little bit about what's going on while you're still here, and it's actually happening.
Yeah. So it's Lisa Kara left since I was a junior in high school. And then it was that spring that the first people moved in. So, it's like obviously we're seeing all the construction going on. But yeah, then it was like, okay, someone's actually moving in.
And did they have to come in on foot, or are they we got cars?
Definitely, yes, we had the road there. But no, I do remember in those earlier days, since the Daisy hadn't opened yet, so there wasn't actually a restaurant. I believe that that had started yet. So we would actually make them dinner for their first night here for like the first, probably like that half of Southbourne before the Daisy opened.
So the first night that somebody moved in, you brought them dinner.
Yeah. So we would, it's like,
so jealous.
My dad that we would.
We got to reinstate that.
But then it was like shortly after that, then the Daisy opened, so that there was an option for people, that they could kind of have that, and it was sort of crazy that you could go get a latte in the woods.
And she moved. Quinn actually lived.
Oh yeah, I'm the only one that actually lived in the community. While
in the townhouse across from the Daisy. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was my senior year that we moved into the townhouse that's across from the Daisy now. And so I lived there until went to Colorado as well in August.
So before I get to like how you guys all got back here, one of the things I think is interesting is that you guys have all had different jobs here. Now Garnie has done everything here, so we can maybe just say she's done everything. but it's really kind of fun to hear about what you guys have done, or maybe what Garnie's talked you into doing at different times. I see Kara. So do we share a little bit about the different roles you've had here?
Yes.
Prior to
so I was a
one?
senior in college at Boulder, graduating. And like I said, before Serenbe even took off, my plan was always to move back to Atlanta, which was why I kind of went to Boulder. My dad's from Colorado, and so we have a ton of family out there. I wanted to get away for 4 years, but I loved Georgia and Atlanta, so I planned to move back. I loved Woodward, our high school as well, so I actually had a job lined up there to run their after-school program. And was coming back in April, I guess, right before I headed back for my final month in school to finalize the paperwork for my job and do kind of my final meet and greet with the team. And Garnie called me and said, Serenbe's really taking off. We need somebody else on the real estate team. Would you ever consider getting your license? And I thought about it for a little while and was like, I don't know. That's just, I'm not really sure. I've always wanted to work at Woodward and it sounds great and blah, 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 blah. And so she's like, okay, we'll think about it. And like later that day or the next day or something, she sent me an email of kind of what their yearly commission had been. And I called her back like, sure, absolutely, I will take the job.
That was your first, besides dinners at the end, your first official role.
Yes. So I got my real estate license. I graduated from college in 2008, so moved back to Serenbe just in time for the recession. So the real estate office was not so fun.
I'm sorry.
And because of that, Raina, one of the very really first agents other than Garnie, who is still on the sales team today, she and I had a lot of spare time in the office just chatting because we kept it open through the whole recession, you know, so we would always be there for like the one person that came in every other week or so.
So sad.
And we drummed up the idea that we wanted to get involved with the Daisy. It at that point had been open for almost 3 years, and the original people involved were ready to move on. And so Raina and I decided that we would take it over. So that was kind of my second venture, was running the Daisy for almost a year.
Mm-hmm.
At that same time, I had started Camp Serenbe. I basically became super stressed and overworked, like, you know, most normal humans would, other than my father and older sister. And for lack of a better word, had a breakdown because I was so overworked. And sort of let with the assistance of Garnie, the real estate and the Blue-Eyed Daisy job go to the side, and continued to follow my passion of running camp, and then started teaching at the Montessori school.
Yes, my kids there. I think we were one of those people that came in every other month and bought a house in 2009. Quinn, you've really been all over.
You know, it's been, various things. I think it definitely first started when I came back after my first year of college, and, you know, it was kind of like, all right, you should probably get a summer job. What's that going to be? So I started working in guest services.
Perfect.
At the end for, my summers. And then that continued.
Checking people in.
Oh, yeah. Checking people in, you know, sometimes serving breakfast, all of the things up there, you know, it's kind of, you never know what you're going to get into.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that was every summer I then did that for college. And then when coming back, you know, after graduation, I was like, that's, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to go, you know, live in Atlanta or somewhere. I was in LA for like a brief period, 6 months doing an internship out there, but then came back that December and was here for a little bit, but knew it was like just a temporary gig. I was in Atlanta, but then even while in Atlanta, had a job up there at ADAC in a showroom for a couple of years. But on the weekends, Garnie always roped me back in when someone would, you know, call out at guest services, or they needed, you know, someone for an extra shift there at the inn. So I knew all the systems, or coming and sitting in the real estate office on the weekends as well. So it was like slowly but surely. And then it was when I was ready to leave my job, but didn't quite know what I wanted to do next, but just wanted a change. I think actually now I'm like, was it Garnie or was it Monica? It's probably a combination of both. Tag team effort.
You know, they were like, all kind of work together.
Exactly. They were like, just come work part-time. It'll just be 2 days a week.
In marketing. It'll be
marketing.
fun.
It'll be great. Monica was like, you won't be reporting to Garnie.
Just me.
It'll be wonderful. But yeah, so then that's how I kind of slowly.
You were like 10
dipped my
hours,
toe
15 hours a week, and then suddenly.
And then slowly, a year later, it was like, all right, this is where I want to be full time.
But you still lived in Atlanta
I did,
during that time. So tell us a little bit about, I'll talk, get your story first. How did you come back to live at Serenbe.
Yes,
and I know that's going to tie into Garnie's, a little bit of Garnie's story.
Yes, I know. Yes, my story is somewhat intertwined with hers. But yes, it was probably the last one to move back, that I was still enjoying living in Atlanta with some girlfriends from high school. We all had a house up there. Still, loved working here. And then it turned out that I met my now husband here, that he, funny enough, moved here before he even met me.
And people always ask, like, if there's people ask all the time, if I'm single, am I going to be able to find anybody at Serenbe? And the answer is yes.
Lucas is also Matt, Garnie's husband's best friend from childhood, that they grew up together. And they were living together in Marietta at the time when Garnie and Matt met. And Matt was moving in with Garnie. And Garnie also brought Lucas along. She found him an apartment in Serenbe as well. So that, yes, with not the intention of, her little sister dating him. But lo and behold, at family dinners and other gatherings that he ended up being, I slowly spent more and more time down here. And then I guess the rest is history. We now have a house that we built together and have been in for 2 years and married for a year and a half.
Yay. Garnie, you want to tell us? I know after that USA Today hit the table, you thought you wanted to come back, but I think your dad said to you.
So I wanted to come home, and I wanted from that, the USA Today article, and then also like I had no interest in kind of signing on for corporate America, like ladder climbing. And so at that point in the hospitality industry, the hotel industry, like you either worked for a big corporate hotel or you worked for like a single operator and had no movement. So none of that made sense. So I was like, maybe I'll go home and like see what dad's doing in the woods. And so I called and said like, what, can I come home and what can I do? And he was like, there's no job here for you. Like there's nothing, like there's literally not a job. And, don't give up on like your dreams. I was like, well, can I move back? Will you let me move back into my room? Like, which at that point was still room 4. I moved back the same Quinn senior year. So Quinn was still in her room 3 and I moved back into room 4. And so he wouldn't give me a job at Serenbe, but did help me get an internship at the governor's office. And during our fellowship, and it was a 7-month fellowship, and on the weekends, I would hang out in the real estate office, which at that time was in what's now guest services at the inn. And I think I was, the pretty like confident 21-year-old who in September, like having been hanging out in the real estate office for like 4 months on the weekends, I came to my dad and said, I think that I can do this better than Coldwell Banker can, because like generally when I'm in there and like talking to people, the reason people are intrigued with moving here is because of like the story, right? Not because there's just a random real estate agent telling them about houses, right? Mm-hmm. And so I said, I think I can do it better. You don't have to hire me, but if I start a real estate brokerage company, will you let me take over Coldwell Banker's contract? Mm-hmm. And then if we're not doing a good job, you can switch back to Coldwell Banker in a year. Mm-hmm. So that was January of 2006. So my fellowship ended in December of 2005, and then Serenbe Real Estate opened in January of 2006.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
She's been here ever since.
Kara, you were going to live in Atlanta and make this your vacation home.
Yes. So as I mentioned earlier, Garnie roped me into coming back, and I did a few different things. And I lived with Garnie throughout that process. So she had built her first townhouse in the community and had an extra room. And I think she sort of felt bad, a little for roping me back in and, to a job that really wasn't going to make any kind of income when the recession started. So she let me live with her for free. So I couldn't turn that down, an apartment in Atlanta that was going to cost me a pretty penny, or a free room in my sister's house. So I was here for 3 years, right after college, and then realized, still being young at the time, then I was 25. And after knowing that I kind of didn't want to work in the real estate office, didn't want to work in the restaurant scene, wanted to work with kids, but wasn't really sure where that was going to go. Camp was kind of just a side project at that time. I didn't know if it was going to be a full-on successful business. I decided to move to Atlanta and kind of do what I had always wanted to do. So I reached out to a family friend who I had ironically met through the real estate office by spending weekends showing her houses, who owned a psychiatry practice in the city. And my undergrad degree was in psychology. And so I said, I don't think that I want to get into this world, but maybe, who knows, could I come just and have an internship with you for 6 months? And so she said, well, I don't really have an internship available, but we are starting this new branch of our business and kind of need somebody to help us get it off the ground who's, organized. And it was a program that was going to be working with high schoolers and somebody who's from Atlanta and sort of knows the school scene. And I said, oh, well, yeah, I can totally do that. So she hired me. I found an apartment in Atlanta. And literally the first day I walked into work, she said, so there's somebody I want you to meet. He is doing some consulting for us, and I think you guys would really hit it off. And I was like, well, I have a boyfriend and you're crazy. But she would not let it go. A month later, I met this guy who was a consultant who lived in Seattle. He is now my husband. So she was right. But so we dated long distance for a year and a half. I then agreed to move to Seattle. It was sort of the exact opposite of anything I had ever thought, but turned out to be kind of exactly what I needed at the time. But I moved out there, not engaged or anything, but I said to him, I will come out here across the country, kind of give up everything just to see if this works out. But the deal is, if it goes well and you propose and we get married and decide to have a family, you have to move back to Georgia to live in this community called Serenbe, because that's where I want to raise our kids. And it worked out. And we moved back almost 4 years ago and have 2 little boys.
You guys built,
hopefully another one day.
Built a house. I mean,
yes,
you had a townhouse.
We just finished. So yes, before we even moved back, I somehow talked him into buying a townhouse as an investment. Garnie, of course, closed the deal for me. But for 2 summers while I lived in Seattle, I would come back still to run camp, because at that point it was kind of taking off. So I would live there in the summer and we rented it out the rest of the time. And then we moved back to the townhouse. And over the past year, we built sort of our dream house and just moved in this past spring.
As you can see, as I've heard the stories, I've teared up several times. No, it's incredible. We started this, it was a passion to save the land, with never an idea of how it would affect the girls coming back. That wasn't even a glimmer in the thoughts. I remember when I sold the restaurant company, and the number of people said, aren't you shortchanging your children? What if they want to have that company? And I said, I never want them to be saddled with my dreams or what I created. So I was very cautious, because I've seen some of that not work out for families. And so I was just the opposite. While I'm thrilled sitting here as it happened with each child, I was very concerned, because I didn't want them to come in and join it just because this was what we were doing. I wanted them to do it because it was their passion and what they wanted. And so sitting here hearing the various stories, it's just heartwarming to see what's happened. And looking back, we absolutely could not have done it. The Serenbe we know today would not be the Serenbe without the 3 of them being involved and now bringing their husbands in the various roles.
So one of the things, the very last thing I want to ask, is there anything that we didn't cover? I'm sure there's tons of stuff, but are there any stories that you want to share that were sort of fun, or that involved all 3 of you on the farm, or just anything? I know that, there's got to be something you don't want to tell. There's some stories you don't want to tell. But I just want to give you an opportunity
One interesting thing is that we didn't mention is all three girls were then married here in very unique spaces that matched their own personalities.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll throw those pictures up on the podcast website. One small story that I had also heard, which I thought was a really neat thing that you did for each of the kids, was at graduation of high school. You want to talk about the books that you guys put together for each daughter, where everybody, your parents gave pages out to friends and family.
Yes, for me it was a surprise because I was the first one, right? It couldn't be a surprise for Karen Quinn, but it's a leather-bound book that was a big square. I don't remember the exact dimensions, but probably like 14 by 14. And they mailed a page, probably like at least 60 to 70 pages, to family and friends, and asked everybody to like write anything, right? So from a memory to a poem to anything that like struck you. And so it's this book of like just love from people. And I still have mine. Well, of course we still have them, but so to take with us, right? And so the little do you think that like you're going off to college, right? And you have this like big, people would ask like, what is that thing? Like, and you're like, well, this is like the book of love, of like in your transition moment.
Yeah. So it's obviously a very special memento, but I remember I was sort of that odd combination of a homebody who like loved my family and friends and, wanted to come back to Atlanta, but wanted this sense of adventure. So went to Colorado. But I have memories of like sitting on my dorm room floor my freshman year, like with everyone new person I would meet, like showing them like the book, like this is my life. And here are all these people. I told Quinn that when she went to college and she's like, yeah, that's weird. But all of my friends, especially my close friends, remember that to this day. Actually, just a couple of years ago, there was like this meme thing going around the internet about a dad who made this book for his daughter, like starting from when she was in kindergarten until senior year, and had like every teacher sign a page of the book. And like every single one of my friends sent it to me, and they were like, oh, you should share your book. Little do they know, like, this is not actually that cool.
Quinn, I know you had a good statement in one of the books. Was that Garnie's book?
Yes, I believe. So on each one of the pages, it was also that you shared a quote that was, memorable or something for you with each of the people. So for mine, that I put in Garnie's was, sisters have one of the most competitive relationships in families. So I decided to sit back and watch.
I want to say thank you to each of you for being here. It really, really adds to the story for today. And thank you for coming by.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
It's always great sharing Serenbe moments.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
And I loved remembering some of the stories.
Thank you for listening to Serenbe Stories. New episodes are available on Mondays. You can subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts. For more details, visit our website, serenbestories.com.